Thank you, and thank you for the double D. That's not something people associate with me, so thank you for that. I see, so Dennis Woodside, former CEO of Motorola, longtime Googler, now COO. We'll get into that. That's an interest. That could be a CEO in waiting. No, I'm kidding. But let's start, we have 15 minutes. So let's start, let's sum up Dropbox or something in a haiku, a little Japanese poem, anything that just so we can get that out of the way and then get to you're talking about okay, go ahead.
Well, I happen to have written a haiku.
You did.
You
actually took me seriously.
I happen to write haiku. So to summarize Dropbox, Europe, growing fast. 120 million users, people in control.
Okay, like
that's
petals
haiku.
On the wind. Okay, and that's nice. You turned it into a very nice, subtle ad for Dropbox.
There we go.
That's good. Well, let's start. I want to start with just what are you doing? So COO, you haven't even had your first year yet, so are you still on your listening tour? Are you just like hearing the...
That was...
What was it that brought you to the company, and what are your marching orders? What are you doing right now?
Sure. So I think most people know Dropbox as a consumer service, but what was exciting to me is the growth of both the business and consumer side. There are over 300 million people using Dropbox today. That's roughly doubled from last year. There are over 100,000 paying businesses, and that's doubled from last year. And the reason that people are using Dropbox is we're creating more and more data. If you think about photography in your personal life, taking photos, videos of your children, in your work life, larger and larger design files, larger and larger video files. As people are more mobile, the old ways of saving things, sharing things, and collaborating just don't work.
But there are a lot of people going after your business. So what makes you special?
Well, I think the reason that there are lots of people going after the business is it's a huge opportunity. Everybody with a hard drive today, in 5 or 10 years, you're not going to be using that hard drive to store your most important information. It will be in a cloud service. So that's potentially a market of 3 billion people on the planet. So of course there's going to be competition for that space. Dropbox was first, and if you ask users, part of the reason we've continued to be successful is people really trust the company with their most important information. Dropbox doesn't have an ulterior motive around collecting information to serve you ads. We don't want to sell you hardware. Such as other companies.
Rhymes with Moogle?
There you
go.
No. And that really resonates with consumers and businesses. They trust Dropbox.
So tell me about, you mentioned Europe, you said 120 million
So 120
users.
million Europeans using Dropbox
Anything
today.
about this market as you've been building out that, I mean, obviously they have different, a certain mindset around privacy, security, regulations are different. How fast is this market growing for you?
Yeah, so our business in Europe is growing faster than our business overall. We have customers such as Spotify, banks, Banque Populaire in France.
Banks use Dropbox?
Banks are using Dropbox for typically for sales presentations and for their sales force.
Not for my credit card information to send over to their friends in Russia or something?
Typically not.
Okay.
But we're seeing traction with large and small customers in Europe. And again, I think people really trust the service with their information. We take privacy, of course, very seriously, which is an issue in Europe.
So if I'm a regulator in the audience, is there any advice you'd give me that I could make your life easier?
No, I mean, I think there have been some people talking about this earlier. There's a healthy debate about the need for consistent regulation around privacy, at the same time balancing government's legitimate needs to investigate crimes. And I think that debate is really, Europe is at the forefront of that discussion. So we'll be active, and we have been active participants in that dialogue.
So when you look at who you think, since you're CEO, entrepreneur, now COO, what do you see as sort of the winners and losers in this environment in terms of who's going to make it and who isn't? Because again, it's a crowded space. It's a lot of people are just looking at the business that you have. Do you see it as well, let me just step back and ask you, what would you be betting on besides Dropbox? What kinds of businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a knee-jerk instinct whenever you're talking about a new business, to say, well, can't Google do that? Can't Microsoft do that? Can't Apple do that? And those companies have tried to change their business models over time, but if you look at a service like Spotify, right? Spotify does one thing incredibly well, and Google has a music service, but most people would say, if you ask them, what music service do you use and do you love, they'd say Spotify. They wouldn't say Google Music. It's really the same thing with our business. I mean, we do one thing incredibly well. We're known for doing one thing today incredibly well.
So we're not going to see diversification?
Well, over time, we may. But that use case is incredibly important to a broad group of people. So I think some of the companies that have been up here today, like Slack is a good example, they're doing one thing really well. And you can build, given the market is so big, literally 3 billion connected people, you can build a very large business very quickly by focusing on a use case that lots of people care about.
So I want to ask a little bit and step back as to what, when you came over to Dropbox, what did you find sort of was the opportunity, the untapped opportunity? Like basically, sure. How are you earning your paycheck?
Well, a big opportunity is global. And Dropbox, just in the last year, has opened up offices in Australia, Japan. We've been growing our Dublin center. We're going to be expanding in Europe, and South America looks interesting as well. So globalizing the company is super important. We've been investing in the business products, so we announced a partnership with Microsoft in November, where Dropbox is a default solution in the Office suite. You can save documents to Dropbox. You can open documents from Dropbox directly into Office. So those partnerships are super important for us. Expanding the number of partners is another big priority for us.
And how do you answer when people start to get concerned around security, whether it's phishing, hacking? Everybody has to deal with that now. How are you dealing with those issues, since it's something that any company that's in tech, any company where files are essentially potentially leaving your operation, you have to be concerned about?
Well, for us, if businesses and consumers didn't trust us, we wouldn't have a business. People they're committing their marriage certificates, all of their photos, their tax returns, very important information.
Who are they sending their marriage certificates to?
I don't know, but they're entrusting it with Dropbox, and if we didn't take that very seriously, we simply wouldn't be in business. So we use 256-bit encryption, we encrypt at rest, we encrypt in transit. We have some of the world's leading security experts that are protecting Dropbox from hacks. We have attempts at hacking Dropbox all the time, and so far none have been successful. So we think that that's a core of what we do, and a core of our value to consumers and to businesses is that we hold your information safe.
And I want to go back to the COO a little bit. Tell me about your relationship with Drew. Is it just that he is essentially focused now on the tech? You're essentially running a lot of the business. You're doing the global. The relationship between the two of you, because you were a mentor to him prior to coming over to the company.
So I think Drew and Arash are an incredible set of founders, deeply technical, care a lot about the user experience, care about design, the usability of the product. They get into the detail around how the product is evolving, and Drew spends a lot of his time with the product teams inventing the next feature or the next part of Dropbox. He spent a lot of time on Carousel recently, which is our photo application.
Yeah.
And I focus mostly on the business. And building our commercial teams.
Do you like not being a CEO?
I actually do like not being a CEO. Being a CEO is a hard job.
Yeah.
Try being a CEO of a hardware company.
What do you not miss, or what do you miss besides the?
Well, what I like about Dropbox again is the growth. I mean, being in a growth environment where we have the ability to hire some of the best engineers. We're getting some of the best engineers in the Valley. We're getting the next generation of engineering leaders who 15 years ago, 12 years ago when I joined Google, they went to Google. They're coming now to Dropbox, which is very exciting for us, because if we look out 2 or 3 years at what they will be building, we have the opportunity to impact hundreds of millions of people's lives positively. So that's a lot of fun, and you only get that in a startup environment.
So we're sitting here this time next year. What are we talking about? You'll be what are you hoping to accomplish? Give us your vision for you're part of the equation?
Well, in Europe, we certainly will be present serving our customers, partners,
more
Dropbox
enterprise
for
business?
Yes, so we would expect that we'll have quite a bit more business in Europe, and we'll have teams to serve the business. I think what you'll see is just an increasing adoption of cloud services across the board, not just in our space, but again, you look at music, you look at collaboration, productivity, some of the things that you heard earlier in the day.
Should anybody want to own you?
Should anybody want to own Dropbox?
Yeah.
You know, we're good for now. The business has done incredibly well from a very early stage. Dropbox figured out really two business models. One is a freemium model where consumers hit their limit on storage and choose to pay us for a premium product called Pro. And the other is Dropbox for Business, which really is just getting going now. So that has funded the business, and we haven't really tapped into the equity that we've raised.
I know our time, this is a short conversation on stage, but you've seen a lot of governments grappling with how to deal with various issues around security, whether it's encryption and such, and different offerings. How is that affecting the business environment or the conversation? They must come to you for your thoughts in terms of essentially, how do they create an environment that's business friendly but still address very real consumer concerns around these issues?
I mean, our legal counsel's engaged in discussions with governments. The issue that we care about is, you know, we recognize government has a legitimate interest to ask for information about our users, but we think the government can be much more transparent in the frequency with which they ask for information, how they do it, how often they do it. And in most parts of the world, there are laws that restrict us from sharing that information or sharing as much information with users as we would like. So we've been trying to drive reform in the US. We've had conversations elsewhere about making sure, government has a legitimate interest, but let's be transparent about it.
And we live in a big data world, but you're not interested in my data? Why not? Like, what if I'm my marriage certificate? I mean, give me some sense of you said you're not going to use the information in a way, of course, that's nefarious, but what advantages do you have given just the sheer breadth of Dropbox and how it's being used, even consumer trends, industry trends that you can tell us about?
You know, a couple things. The amount of information in Dropbox is pretty staggering. There's 1 billion files saved every day to Dropbox. We have something like 30 billion Office documents. It's a huge number of Office documents, which is why the relationship with Microsoft is important. But you know, one thing when we talk to consumers and businesses, they don't want to be beholden to one ecosystem. They don't want to be locked into, you know, a Google world or an Apple world, and they just don't act that way. Their friends might have an iPhone, they might use Android, and they use Windows at work. And one thing that we pride ourselves on is we develop equally across all of those platforms. Our product works just as good on all of them, whereas a lot of our competitors, they're optimizing, and they're really trying to lock people in.
Are you finding just certain industries, though, in terms of when you look at just the usage patterns that are interesting around sort of how consumers are using Dropbox or how businesses are using it?
Well, I think from a business standpoint, any business with large files is starting to evaluate a solution like Dropbox. So if you think about architectural firms where you have workers on location that need access to the latest plans. If you think about media companies that are producing advertising and highly produced video files, where they need to share that with outside producers as well as with potentially a network, they're using Dropbox. So we see tremendous traction really around the world in marketing, design firms. You know, a good example is Under Armour, which is an athletic apparel company. They have design centers around the world. The design files are too big to ship via FTP or email, and they're using Dropbox to get work done.
So we started with a haiku. Let's end with some closing thoughts in terms of how you're seeing the landscape or predictions, a limerick. Just give us some give us some closing thoughts in terms of what you'd be looking for right now, or even sort of what's intriguing on your radar.
Yeah, well, for Dropbox, we've done a great job of creating a place where people store their most important information. What we're now focused on is enhancing that information, making it more available, more productive to the user. So, a taste of things to come, a product that we launched last year called Carousel enables photo sharing in a much different way, much easier way. You can access all the photos you've ever taken on your phone. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be building to delight Dropbox users.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Dennis.